It's Harley J, and today I'm going to be talking about the new Dangan Ronpa 3, The End of Hope's Peak Academy anime, specifically the Future arc. Obviously, this is going to be filled with spoilers, so unless you've seen the anime, I suggest turning away now. All of the characters within the anime are suspicious in their own ways, some more than others in my opinion. I'm going to be going through the three of the characters' interactions and stories of the first two episodes, and letting you know my opinion on who I think may not be so hopeful. At the top of my list right now are probably Sakakura, Mirai, and Gozu. To me, these three seem very suspicious, and some of their actions and paths just don't line up. In Sakakura's case, he is shown from the get-go to be highly prejudiced against Negi, and him and Munakata both made similar comments on how the ultimate despair should be eradicated at all costs. It's obvious that the killer is wanting Negi to look as guilty as possible, especially with Asahina's death where Negi's hand was covered in her blood. So it would make sense that a person with such a drive to get Negi killed would also try and set him up as the killer. He may even believe in the same principle as Kamida when it comes to hope and despair, as he believes that despair needs to be eradicated at all cost, which maybe created some kind of despair to get that true hope at the end. However, his only saving grace is that it's quite an obvious answer, and with Dangan Ronpa being so intricate, I'm sure they wouldn't make it that obvious. Mirai, though, is less of an obvious suspect, although I've seen a lot of people on Tumblr speculating about him, and I personally agree. He was the last one to turn up to the meeting and appears to be generally unnoticed by the group, except by Tengen, who sounds surprised that he's even there. This blending into the background ability would be useful, and it's actually one of the pieces of evidence against him. I read a theory on Tumblr that it may have been Mirai that had deployed the bomb with the sleeping gas in the first place. If you see in the episode, you see that the bomb is more rolled into shot rather than being brought in from the outside. If it's rolled in from behind, that's where Mirai was stood. I also saw with this theory that Mirai is the super high school level animator, and that he'd be good at using different hand and wrist techniques, so maybe that's what let him roll it in without being noticed, which is what I thought was an interesting point. Something else that I noticed when watching the second episode is that when Bandai is killed, it's because Mirai provoked Sakakura into kneeing him, which is quite the opposite from his usual quiet demeanour. This may have been because he knew what Bandai's forbidden action was, and knew that Sakakura would react in a way that kind of challenged with violence. Also, when Munakata asked everyone to point out who they believed the attackers to be, Mirai looked very worried, which is a strange reaction if he was innocent. In Gozu's case, there isn't as much evidence as with the other two, but the evidence against him is pretty extreme. Personality-wise, you don't know much about him, as he does keep a mask on at all times, which is suspicious in itself. He may be someone who isn't meant to be in there, but they can conceal their identity with a mask, maybe as an outside force. In the second episode, we see him fighting with Munakata for acting out against Negi, and he bursts into the corridor where Asahina and Negi. He then runs over to help take them somewhere to hide, but without hesitating, he picks up Negi and carries him over his shoulder. This must mean he knew about Negi's forbidden action, but Negi only told Asahina before Gozu burst into the corridor. This is suspicious to me as Asahina had already put Negi down, so it's not even like he could guess that he'd hurt his leg and needed carrying or anything. The only way he could have known his forbidden action previously is if he knew about them beforehand. When the whole room was knocked out by the sleeping gas right before Asahina was killed, Gozu was nowhere to be seen. This may be because he's out of shot or some kind of animation error, but I doubt that, based on how close he was standing to Gekugahara in the shot before. Overall, I think these three are very suspicious, and I'll probably make another video on what I think about all the other characters, but I'll save that for another time, as this is already pretty long. So let me know what you think, and share with me some theories for or against what I've said. I'm interested to hear it all. See you next time.